a second-generation Cape Verdean American, born and raised in the Fox Point section of Providence, Rhode Island. Door to door, it's 55 minutes headed south on Route 95 from Boston to Providence. Benefit Street was the Mason-Dixon line that separated the folks at the top of the hill from the folks at the bottom of the hill. Those of us at the bottom of the hill served those at the top of the hill as domestics and cooks in wealthy homes or Brown University. I was invited to Brown University to give a talk at the Nightingale House. There is nothing out of the ordinary about this, other than the fact I was born and raised a stone's throw away, a block down Benefit Street, a left on Planet Street, and down the hill. I was unprepared for the feelings that swept over me as I stepped into John Brown's house for the first time in my life. Stepping over the threshold into the house where John Brown, John Nicholas Brown, lived and raised his children, was a symbolic head-on collision of his world and my world. As I stood, facing Mr. Brown's portrait, staring to my heart's content, childhood memories came flooding back, of seeing him well into his later years, tall, gaunt, a long head with staring eyes, and in robes, marching in the Brown commencement. He fascinated me with that unforgettable face, exuding a sense of power, presence. It was the same feeling with my grandfather, who was also tall, thin, commanding, but very dark. He had presence and dignity, but there wasn't a feeling of fear or apprehension with Grandpa. So, here I am in your house, Mr. Brown, Antonio and Celestina's granddaughter. Maybe you're as uncomfortable as I am. You know and I know the rules. We are two faces of history that were never supposed to meet, and certainly not in your parlor. But here we are, an unexpected neighborly visit, decades overdue. Hi, neighbor. If you looked out of any of your second-floor windows, you had to have seen me on many of my almost daily trips down Benefit Street to Bob and Gloria Solomon's store for milk, bread, Winston's for my parents, and my penny candy. The waterfront at the foot of the hill was where the men unloaded lumber, cotton, and cargo that supplied the factories and mills that created the vast wealth for the people at the top of the hill. If you stepped out of the door of your garden onto Power Street and glanced down the hill, you could probably see Johnny, Dada Alves, and Kenny Oliveira sitting on the ledge on the side of the Boys Club. If you stepped a little further into the street, you could see down to the bottom of Power Street and the Boys Club, the home away from home for 3 generations of boys from the Point. A long time ago, before the river got polluted, our fathers used to jump off the pilings and swim in the river. They said there were tunnels you could see from the water that went up to the houses on the hill. They'd go in to explore with flashlights and a bucket of rocks to throw at the rats. You must have driven or been driven down Power Street to South Main Street. Did you see Teresa and Danny playing on the corner of Power Street and Well? How could you not see such beautiful little children? South Main Street was 2 ways then, with folks out there all the time hanging out in front of Mile's Bar or catching up further down where South Main Street and Wickenden Street connected. That's the side of my house up on the hill behind Aunt Pat and some of us kids. 26 Planet Street. Our landlords were the Morans, Bill and Skip. Their aunt lived on Benefit Street. They did shipping too. We were on the top floor. My father worked for the state and is a longshoreman. George and Rosie Lemer and their children lived downstairs. Big George worked as a cook at Brown. Rosie and my mom did domestic work. All the neighborhood kids played in the big parking lot in the front of my house. Mr. Brown, come on inside for a minute and visit me in my house. My house was 5 rooms and cozy with a kerosene stove that heated the living room. It had a beautiful mantel and 3 bay windows that faced the Burnside apartments and Mr. Conti's house. My mother was proud of saying you could eat off the floor. Same with Rosie's downstairs. Everything sparkled, and there was always the smell of something good cooking. I was the baby of the family, and I got to go to the new Fox Point school that my mom and other parents had fought to get for us kids in Fox Point. I started kindergarten there with my cousin Shell, who lived at the bottom of Planet Street. In the summer, my sister would take us up to the Brown campus to roller skate and ride our bikes. Then we'd run through the Fawn's house to see the stuffed bear. Could you hear the music from the big parties at the San Antonio Club on Power Street up the hill at your house? Don't know how you couldn't. You must have had a hard time getting down Power Street past all the cars of folks who came from New Bedford and Connecticut. That's my mother and father on Power Street, probably leaving a function at the club. Weren't they a good-looking couple? Easter was a big holiday, and we always posed for pictures in front of the house on the way to church. What did you do with your family on the holidays, Mr. Brown? All of us in the neighborhood, including you, were probably going to church Easter morning. Did you see us taking our pictures? In the background of all of our pictures is the fence of the big yard, of the John Brown house right across the street from you. The staff there chased a couple of generations of us out of there when we climbed over the fence to play in the beautiful grassy yard. Again, really didn't think much about it, but those houses at the top of the hill were quietly watching us through the windows and from behind high walls. A dragon slumbers, but never sleeps. 16 Planet Street, the house next door to us. I spent hundreds of hours there from the time I was 9 years old, babysitting for well-to-do couples. I loved that house and knew every nook and cranny. Every time someone moved out, I'd badger my father saying, "Why can't we move next door? Why? It's empty now. Why? Why? Why?" My father would just get quiet and never answered. There was a lot I didn't understand. When I was about 8 or 9, a steely-eyed patrician woman with snow-white hair walking down Benefit Street told my friends, the nice people who lived in the golf house, to put that Negro child down. I ran home crying and told my father. He just got very quiet and never answered. I remembered it was in the summertime, near dusk, and my father just stood looking out the window in the kitchen at the neon sign and clock on the tall towers of the electric company. There was a lot I didn't understand. We loved our house. It was full of memories from the early 1940s, playing in the front yard, a visit from Granny Montero up from Cape Cod, the kitchen table that became the ping-pong table during holidays, helping Mom stuff the Thanksgiving turkey, great-granddaughter's birthday party under great-granny's watchful eye, Daddy posing in front of his prized ivy garden, my wedding in 1973. Everybody from Providence, the Cape, and New Bedford came back to Planet Street after the reception and crammed into the house. We could barely move, but boy, it was wonderful. When I was still in high school, I remember my father running up the back stairs, saying, "We've got to move, we've got to move," in that tone of voice that meant it was something serious and scary. My parents moved in 1974, and 26 Planet Street got torn down. Aunt Pat and Uncle Charlie were forced out and moved to East Providence. 16 Planet Street stayed. It was historic, I guess. Our house became the parking area for 16 Planet Street. South Main Street changed, too. Nobody did anything because things were going to get torn down, and people were getting scared. I can still smell the strange old musty smell of dead houses, plaster, mortar, and brick rubble. I guess, Mr. Brown, this is what happens when the dragon wakes up. Do you remember sitting in your beautiful garden behind the high brick wall while we were just a few yards away on the other side of the wall, just below you? All of us peacefully enjoying the special quiet of a summer night along Benefit Street. Remember that quiet? Remember how beautiful Benefit Street looked in the winter, with the first soft snowflakes, the chimes of the First Unitarian Church marking the hours that put me to sleep every night, the scent of the honeysuckles. These memories belong to all of us. We were equals in the night. We shared that space, but now it's yours, and for us a memory. Maybe you heard the whisper in the night air of a little girl's prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. What happened, Mr. Brown, really? Why do you still have your house and we don't?